Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Oriire podcast, the podcast that tells African stories. I'm Haleemah.
And I'm Sesi. And today we're going to be discussing African folktales and folklore with our special guest, Imisi. Say hi, Imisi.
Hello, guys. How are you all doing? Good to be here.
Imisi is part of the Oriire team, and he's very excited to be here today to discuss this. He has lots of notes. So let's get into it. But first of all, how was your week, guys? How was it?
Well, mine was very stressful. It was highly chaotic. It's still chaotic. It's going very chaotic, but I can't complain. It's going all right. How's your week?
I think chaotic is probably the best way to describe mine as well. I still feel like only part of me is present in this place. So it should be a fun episode because I'm all over the place. How about you, Missy?
I was hoping that one of us didn't have a chaotic week. Turns out three of us did because mine was as chaotic too.
It must be going around.
Yeah, it looks much better now with the holidays.
Oh yeah, holidays, guys.
And by the way, Happy New Month, you guys. We're recording this on the 1st of April.
So if we do any nonsense, just take it as April Fools, okay? Mm-hmm. Give us a break. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the background of folktales and folklore, of African literature, let's say. Let's talk about the background of it. Imisi, do you want to give us a primer?
First of all, I noticed that a lot of people make the mistake of confusing folklore and folktale. Some people think it's the same thing. They interchange it. I think because of the word folk in front of it, but they mean very different things. And I'm just going to give a quick expose. Folktales are basically fictitious stories that are born out of or that are a product of imaginations of narrators from the past, and they are just stories that are didactic and tells morals and all of that. So they are basically tales. While folklore goes beyond folk tales, and in some ways it is kind of equal or even goes beyond literature itself, because folklore has to do with the totality of the body of information that a community possesses. That includes dressing, superstition, religion, music, arts, architecture, every traditional thing that a community does. Is that folklore rather? And it's safe to say that folklore is simply what the people traditionally do on the one hand, and what they traditionally say on the other hand.
Okay, so if I'm getting you, let me just dumb it down small. So folk tales are basically all those stories meant to teach moral lessons that, are passed down, like the tortoise and the hare. Yeah. Folklore is like a store of culture, and it's basically all these, cultural mores and norms and knowledge.
One has like the totality of everything. So folk tales even come under folklore.
Oh, that's really interesting stuff. I didn't know the difference. And you guys know how oral African literature is not really appreciated, and it's just like Imisi said with folk tale, I guess. Most people just regard it as something fictional, not something true. Why do you think that's the case?
Okay. I think it's because of the word oral literature itself. Oral literature is I think the attitude of people towards oral literature arises as a result of the kind of from the name itself. When something is oral, that means it is spoken. Oral has to do with word of mouth, and then literature has to do with something that is written, because literature is from the word literal, which means to write or to document. So it's kind of antithetical to say something is oral and written at the same time. Oral literature is also called vernacular tradition, and we all know what vernacular is. It means something that has to do with illiterate, maybe agriculture, or something that is backward, basically. So people just give that attitude to it, like, okay, oral literature is something that belongs in the past and not for the modern people. And that's not really it, because even the modern day literary exposure as we have it today derives its antecedents from oral literature. So I think people need to change their attitude towards folklore, folktales, and oral literature, basically.
Yeah. Do you think something that feeds into that? Because like I know that, as Africans, most of our history, especially like old history, even though history is already old, was passed down orally and was more like just stories told from like, parent to child and then passed on or grandparent to child. And a lot of it over time it gets distorted, People, it's like Chinese whispers. At the end of the day, by the time you get to the last person, it's a completely different message from what the first person said. So that, might kind of be a contributing factor to why people regard oral literature as kind of a lesser form. Because, if it's written, at least you can go back and you're seeing the original version. But with oral literature, who knows?
Exactly. You're right. With oral literature, you see that real content, as you said, does not retain its quality anymore. People could add their own opinions, their own stories to it, and so it changes. So yeah, you're right.
One day, the tortoise came on the hare. Anyway, that's an example. I think in addition to why oral literatures are like not taken so serious, if I can use that word, is because most of the people that perform it, like people perform it in different ways. So I think some people exaggerate it more than others. What do you guys think? I think that's another contributing factor to
I really agree with you about that. Or in fact, let me not just even talk about African oral. In fact, oral literature in general, like poetry readings, for example, gives me the hives. I can't honestly watch somebody like just recite poetry because I just feel so awkward. It's like I'd rather read it.
Yeah. Don't say that. You can't even say that while I'm here because
I'm sorry.
For 2-line poem.
I like to read poems, but when I'm hearing people recite them, it's like, why? It seems like something that shouldn't be said. And people always have,
and some people do the most. It's like, one day the tortoise came, and I'm like, okay, the tortoise came. So, okay, so Imisi, in most African literature, oral literatures, they use musical instruments and stuff. Could you tell us more about that?
When it comes to oral literature, another reason why, let me just quickly add, another reason why people should embrace oral literature is there's actually no huge difference between oral literature and written literature. The only difference is in the fact that, can you guys hear me? The only difference is in the fact that one is written and one is spoken. Because when you look at oral literature, you see myths, legends, fables, tongue twisters, and proverbs. They're under prose because they are narratives. And you see songs, war songs, heroic songs, walk songs, they're under poetry. And you see drama, such as festivals, as ancestral worships, masquerading, they're under drama. So every category of oral literature fits into every category of written literature. So when you talk about music falls under poetry. And music is very important in oral literature because it makes the performance to be robust and very much alive. And when you see in some drama cases, like in ancestral worship, in festivals, to consult deities, they need to use music because it feels like there's a way it imbues or raises the, I don't know how to, but encourages the deities or something to come to life. So music is very much important, instruments and all of that. And that's one of the most important aesthetics of oral literature. So music means a lot in oral literature.
Let's think about African folk tales now. And we know how they were passed on from generation to generation. We already addressed that. But why do you think that African folk tales are always so obviously moral? Let's say, like, there's always some, it can never just be a little fun story. It's always like, oh no, you should have married that guy, that's why you died.
Or it just ends with like, and that is why you should not betray your mother. And I'm like, why?
Why is it so preachy?
And it's always like that's why tortoise broke its back or something, and so you should never climb so place so you don't break your back or something. I think that's as a result of the fact that there's something we call aesthetic signifiers, and they're like 14. African literature generally and African texts and the African world, they have like 14 aesthetic signifiers. So one of the most important signifiers of Africa
is that we teach morals, because we're very communitarian, respectful people. And so we like to make sure that people follow these socially accepted behaviors. And so we use those stories to make sure that this is the path to follow. So that's why you see in some fables like the tortoise and the hare, fables are stories that revolve around animals and the animal world. You see that, okay, when someone steals something, something happens to him eventually. So it's like vices are punished and virtues are rewarded. And that's to teach children a very important message at a very young age. So when those children grow up, they can easily follow the socially accepted behavior because they've been taught from a very young age. So that's why stories, African stories, their tales, their fables, their legends, they're very much didactic and functional.
So speaking of animals, like you were like, oh, they always use animals to illustrate these stories. Why? Why do you think, animals feature so much? It's always the tortoise and the hare, or, do they even talk about snakes? I don't know. I'm only remembering tortoise and hare now. I have a brain block. I can't remember any other ones.
Any tale where there's a snake as a character? I don't think.
I don't think so. That's why I was trying to think, and I was like, no. But when you think of animals that people think are bad, you think of snakes.
I think there's the dog one, where the dog went to heaven. There's the dog. Do you guys know that one?
I think I know that one.
Yes.
Dog goes to heaven to eat and then gets fat and comes back to earth. Yeah, very interesting tale. Yeah. I can't really categorically say I know the answer to that question, but African narratives, basically, they like to feature the natural as well as the supernatural. And so you see that there are always hills, forests, mountains, and stuff like that. And so they use their immediate environment as a classroom template, basically. And so animals are the immediate things in our environment. And that's why they use animals. In some cases, you see human beings as well. I know a tale whether you know that it's called Oriire, where a lady wants to get married, she meets tortoise, she meets all those sorts of things. So they make use of humans as well, but basically they just want to use the things they see in their immediate environment and that people can easily relate with.
Oh, that makes so much sense. So we've been talking a lot about folk tales. Could you give us an example of a folklore?
As I said, folklore is like an information. So folklore is dressmaking is folklore. Folktale is folklore. Dressmaking is folklore. The manners that a particular set of people have, that they have inherited over time, that's a folklore, because that's the information that their community possess. So the way we make dress, in Yoruba land, for example, we make adire and tie and dye and all of that. And agbada, the way we wear clothes, our agbada, men wear agbada and women use iro and buba. And it's very different in other African cultures, but we all have cultures that is specific to us. So that's our folklore, basically, because it's the information that is pertinent to us.
Oh, that's very interesting. So do you know any similarities between oral African literatures in different African communities? Let's say Yoruba versus the Akan people in Ghana.
Not exactly. I think the best person to ask is Sesi, because it feels like she's been to different places, so she might know. I don't.
Sesi,
I know.
World tourist.
I know within Nigeria. I know that there's a similarity between the Yoruba and the South people. Like Oriire and Olajumoke, for example, I think it's a myth. They also have that kind of story, which is a folktale in the South. So I know similarities between inter-tribal places, but I really don't know outside of Africa. I think Sesi should know.
Sesi doesn't know. Sesi doesn't know. I mean, I'm sure there are some similarities, because some people from other African cultures even know similar folk tales to the ones that people that we've heard in Nigeria. So it's likely that there are a lot of similarities. That's something we should investigate more on Oriire, because part of what we do on Oriire is document African culture. So we should look into what are the similarities in folk tales among people of different communities in different African cultures.
We definitely should, so that we'll see how a nexus is drawn, how different they are, and all of that. But I know that in most tales, there's always the small animal and the big one, and the small animal always manages to topple the huge one. Because, for example, there's a story in Yoruba of the I can't remember what it is now. But I know that there's a story also in Ghana of the spider who wins the elephant. I think there was a duel and everything, and the
I think
spider
it's called Anansi. Sorry.
Anansi, yeah.
Anansi, yes, exactly. In Ghana, they make use of Anansi, just like we make use of tortoise a lot in Nigerian folktales. They like Ghana. They like Anansi in Ghana. So I think the spider entered the elephant's nose and blocked it, and the elephant could not breathe, and that was how the spider won the duel and all of that. So I know that there's a similarity in the small having a small animal as a character and a big one, and that concretizes human existence. And that's something that Africans have always privileged, that the small one can become the big one, basically.
Oh, that makes so much sense. I also think something that could maybe, I might be reaching here, but something that contributed to that is it could be like the colonial history or like, ethnic conflict, how like smaller tribes think they can conquer. For example, the Queen Moremi story we spoke about, how the small Ile-Ife could conquer the bigger Igbo people and stuff. I think, like you said, they just derive all these stories from their immediate environments.
Yes, that's right. That's true. And by the way, do you guys have any Oriki? Do you guys know your Oriki? Because Oriki is part of folklore. Do you guys know that?
This is funny because the other day I was just messaging my mom and I was like, what is my Oriki? Because I just randomly, like when I was a kid, I remember my grandpa and grandparents always saying it. So she sent to me, I had to look up the picture.
Oh, so
I do have an Oriki, but it's just a name. I don't even know if they use it for anything. Like normally Oriki is supposed to have something long, like almost something, almost something. But mine is really just a name. I think it's also interesting. I think we should talk about that. How people do things out of, I don't know, because everyone does it or out of tradition. No one really knows the true meaning of why we do that particular thing. So do you know why they give people Oriki?
I always assumed it was kind of like a blessing thing, that it happens at like, I don't know if it's your naming ceremony or whatever, but it's like they're trying to prophesy, good things into your life. And then it may also be like some things related to family as well. So yeah, I found my Orikis. I don't know. Are you supposed to tell people your Oriki? Is it one of those Ori things, like
No, come on. You can tell people they're not going to use it for anything. It's something you can say anywhere. It's not your ATM passcode.
So
wait, before you start, Sesi, is Oriki not a name, or is it like a long verse?
No.
Actually,
it's just like some hailings. I don't know.
Then I just wait, my Oriki, I just thought it was Ajoke. Is that an Oriki or is just the name?
Maybe it's both. I don't know.
Yeah, Oriki is made up of many things. Oriki is called praise poems in African literature, or in Africa basically, and we also call them panegyrics. And there are many ways you can get Oriki. There's something a particular scholar, Daniel Kunene, calls poetry of association. That is, the things that are associated to you are used as your Oriki. Like if you are fine, if you are dark, they could say Omodudu. You understand? Omodudu, Omokupa. That was a king, or so they could say Omoba, something. So that's associative experience, and so that's a way of getting Oriki. So I'm very sure Aduke is not your only Oriki, and you have plenty of other associative Orikis, I'm sure, that you don't know. You should ask your...
I need to ask. Yeah, I really do. So, Sesi, go ahead with your Oriki.
In Lesotho, for example, Sotho boys, when growing into adulthood, are made to go through a particular task of hunting animals and all of that. And so, when they do that, they get new Oriki and panegyrics, such that the one that defeated the lion born of cats, all those names, the one who defeated the tiger, and it still happens today in Lesotho. So that's also a way people get panegyrics, through their feats and achievements. So I think Sesi wants to go ahead with telling us our Oriki now.
Yes, so excuse my pronunciation, because some of these things are Egun, and I can't speak Egun. Okay, so there's Omonego. I don't know what that means. It's from my mom's dad's side, and he's from Ondo. So I don't know what nego means in Ondo. I've never heard it before.
Child of wealth.
Oh, really?
I don't know.
Does she know? She doesn't know. She does not know.
I don't know, you guys. I just heard ego, and I'm like, okay, ego is more Igbo language.
Ego is
Good
not even an
now.
Igbo language. Like, it's not even Yoruba.
Then I have Ladembi, Owuja Meji Sholabi, and that's from my mom's side, they're Ijebu. Then I have Badagri Hosu, because I'm from Badagri. I have Bo Ahanko, I don't know what that means. Zamba Kwanago. But anyway, yes. So if you guys know the meaning of these things, please let me know, because I really want to know.
I'm weak.
Haleemah just said it means happiness. I'm sure she does not
I'm
know.
okay. I'm okay with that. But yeah, if the audience knows what it means, you guys can let me know. I would actually like to learn more about it. Any Igbo people, any Ijebu people, Ondo people, they're my people too.
I would as well. I mean, I know my lineage is Oriire. I don't know mine personally, but I think while I was growing up, they used to say it a lot because my grandfather was a king, so I think I still know it. It goes like Oriire Dade, Momo, Igirabatalugun, Omowa, and blah. I'm sure only Yoruba people would understand. So at least Sesi and I tried now. We had like 3 sentences.
Yeah. Omoekun means, I said Omoekun, that's a serious one. Omoekun means like child of a lion, I think, or
of a
lion child.
Of a lion. Yeah. At least I said we tried. You and I, we had like 3 sentences. Haleemah had just the one, just Ajoke, and that's all.
Well, you tried, Jerry.
And Imisi is a prince, you guys. Hope you guys didn't miss that. He said he's from a king.
Yeah.
Or something. Okay.
Oh, he's a prince?
I am. And funny thing is, my mom was also a princess before she married my dad. So like a princess married a prince and all.
Wow.
So yeah,
this
guys,
is a royal.
Yes,
we have royals here among
us. Yeah.
Mbidemi wrote Prince of Zamunda. Did you guys have you guys seen Coming to America Part 2?
No, and I never will, because I could
have.
Before I say anything about it, what are your thoughts on that movie?
Exactly.
I actually like the movie. I like the fact that the princess became the king eventually. That speaks a lot about the current situation of things. That
spoiler alert, by the way.
I'm sure many people have seen it. I mean, it's been out for like a couple of months. So,
to be honest, the reason I don't want to watch it is because Coming to America 1 is so special to me that I don't want anything to spoil it in my eyes. It's like I'm like that with a lot of movies. Like, please just let me hold on to my nostalgia. I don't need any fresh perspective. It's okay.
I think that's a very good decision. Don't watch that movie. The only part in that movie that I'm like, yes, was when I heard shake way. I'm like, oh, come on, Davido. Yes. But that's the only thing I from that movie.
I'm sure Coming to America fans would come for you right now because the movie is not so bad at all.
I found it very cringe-worthy. I'm like, you guys, you didn't have to like. They exaggerated a lot of scenes, and I think that was the point. But I'm like, nah, it could have been a lot nicer.
Well, in their defense, I don't think they could have done better because for you to live up to that pace or that feat that you've created is very, very difficult. So.
Yeah,
they tried their best. Yeah.
So, Imisi, could you tell us the relevance of like oral folktale, African folktale, folklore in our contemporary society?
I know that oral literature reminds us of our history, our culture, and our heritage, which is very important because that's what defines us eventually. And there's a way it tangles us to our roots and our identity, and that's really very important because no matter where you go, you see that other people apart from Africans, they always try to embrace their own identity. They speak their languages and stuff, but we Africans have not really infiltrated the world community. We still, live up to the expectations of other people and all of that. So oral literature teaches us about what we used to have and what we have lost. And so under oral literature, as I said, we have festivals, we have myths, we have legends. They're very didactic. They teach morals. They create subtitles that are inherent in people. They concretize human existence. They even help in exercises through the acrobatic displays and dances and all of that.
So now let's get to the interesting bit. Oh, first of all, Bidemi asked a really good question, actually, which I think is kind of debatable. And the question is, can we create new folk tales? I think unequivocally the answer is yes, because that's how folktale starts. Somebody starts it, and then 100 years later, people remember it. So yes, I think so. But what's your perspective on that, Haleemah and Imisi?
I agree with you that I think we can create new folktales. I even think like we already said at the beginning of this podcast, a lot of the folktales we have, they've been watered down, or people have added their own bits and stuff. So I don't really think we have the authentic folktales. So basically we can create our own, we can write our own stories and stuff. So yes, I think we can create new folktales. What's your opinion on it, Imisi?
I kind of sort of disagree though, because there's something about oral literature there are some certain words that should be taken away when you talk about oral literature, folktales included. Pristine. That is, it is pure. It is rudimentary. Like myths, for example, they are rudimentary narrative sequences that are very much functional. They are pristine, and they explicate human evolution and gratify social customs. And so when you create new stories that do not relate to the cultural milieu that oral literature is in itself, then you're creating something new entirely. That's just a story. Oral literature, folk tales are tales born of imagination from narrators of the past. They were called griots. You understand? So they were special people. Not just anyone could tell a story back then. They were trained people that all their life, that was what they were trained to do, griots and all. So I think if anyone wants to create a folktale now, it might just be, maybe even it could be an adaptation, because I don't think there'll be originality.
I disagree with you vehemently. Do you know why? Because 100 years from now, like if I start a story now, 100 years from now, who's going to remember that, it wasn't started by a griot? People don't be like, oh yes, this is what my father's father told me in my, and then it goes into like the history books like that. So to be honest, I think there's no way to even verify that any of these old folktales came from these griots, these purists in the first place. It could have just been some random old man who said, oh, children of the village, gather around under this tree, let me tell you a story.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. That, I mean, you can write something and in the next 50 years, people see it as special and superb and all. But my point still remains that the kind of imagination, spontaneity that they had at the time, it was thought to be rare. And, white people came and they said we had no literature, no language. We only reasoned within the bouts of food and sex, but people still told stories, even in that supposed darkness. And so that means a lot. That means a lot more than what you create right now. You have a computer, you have your tab and everything. So I think there's a huge major difference. For them to have been so creative and imaginative, that goes a long way. And besides that, folk is not just a normal word. Folk means traditional people. And we're not folks, basically.
We're not folks now, but to our great-grandkids, we might be. Exactly. They'll be like, look at these old people. I can't believe they used to watch TV. Probably now they'll be projecting it in the sky. Who knows? So right now, we're thinking we're so modern and cutting edge, but really, 100 years from now, people will be like, I want all these old people. What were they doing? They were primitive.
Maybe. I think we should just agree to disagree.
I think, Imisi, your point is interesting. You're one of those like historians that believe in the purity of of history, basically. Let me say that's repetitive, but it's really interesting to hear. So your perspective is I still disagree with it, but it's very interesting to hear.
Let's go to the fun part now, which is, the nostalgia section where we remember all the folk tales that we used to be told as kids, and where we think about modern adaptations. Are there really any modern? I've always wondered. Actually, there are lots of modern adaptations. But when you think about stories, okay, these are really folk tales. I think I've answered my own question in my head, so maybe I shouldn't bother to say it.
But still spill it out. We could have an opinion.
I was going to say, like, modern stories, like Madame Koi Koi, and all these boarding school tales that we used to hear. But then it occurred to me that those aren't folk tales, because do they teach a moral lesson? I don't think so. But they were lore, let's say. I would call them lore, because now they are like part of the fabric of of Nigerian society, to the point that kids that are going to that boarding school probably 20 years later would hear it, and kids 20 years before me heard about it as well. So I don't know if I would classify them as folktales though.
I'm not sure too, but I think they're just tales, but they're not necessarily folktales. Yeah, you were talking about adaptations of folktales. I know of some. I've read many books where within that in text there are so many tales that they employ. For example, even one of the most important books in African literature, Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe, there's so many folk tales and proverbs and all of that, which are drawn from oral narratives. So I think there are so many adaptations. I can't really think of one specifically.
There are some really popular ones. Like there are some. Have you heard of American Gods, the book by Neil Gaiman, which is a really great book, by the way?
True,
and Anansi is featured prominently in it.
Oh, really? That's the spider, right?
Yeah, Anansi the spider. In fact, there was a book before American Gods where it was just about the spider, and it was actually a really good book. I recommend that you read it. Called Anansi Boys by Neil Gaiman. And it's ironic because I would really like to see more African literature about this, you know? Like, I would like to see more African writers write about folktales and folklore, and do modern adaptations. But even the most famous ones are by like white authors, American authors, British authors, which is kind of sad.
And then there's another modern adaptation of like African folktale folklore titled Orisha's Journey. Is a short animated film by a New York City-based Ghanaian filmmaker. So you guys should probably check that out too.
And let's not forget to remember our African writers as well. We have many of them have also adapted oral narratives and folktales. Elechi Amadi's The Concubine is one of them. Amos Tutola's Palm Wine Drinkard, yes, is one of them. That really drew a lot from narratives. So African writers too. Olarotimi has a lot of plays. Even Olarotimi's drama, I can't remember, Moro Ntodun, it brought the modern day writing form to play on it and all, but it still drew from Moroni. So African writers also do the same, I think. And then there's this particular has anyone heard of Miwindo Epic?
I haven't.
It's a Tanzanian epic, a long prose form sets of stories. It's called Miwindo Epic, and this has been adapted, I think, into Kirikou. I know Sesi has probably heard about Kirikou.
I love Kirikou.
I love Kirikou as well. It's a 1996 cartoon, and it drew from Miwindo. Everything that happened to Miwindo mostly happened to Kirikou. Immediately he was born, he could eat, he could carry calabash, he could do things by himself. And when you watch Kirikou, you see that also. So people are drawing from folktales.
Oh, that's very interesting. And by the way, I just realized we've been saying Bidemi, but we didn't say who Bidemi
was.
Yeah, that's true.
And she's in the call, but she's not speaking on the call, if that makes sense. So she's just like giving her inputs and stuff. So hi, Bidemi.
She has texted us to say hi back. She's not going to.
Yeah, she says hi. She says hi. So let's round up by talking about what do you think Africans have lost by trying to insist that their heritage should be oral rather than written? I don't know if insist is the right word, but what do you think we've lost by sticking to oral literature rather than written literature? Because, as we said, a lot of it is distorted and it is watered down from what it originally was. And then a lot of it is forgotten as well. And how can we compare that with other cultures, let's say, that did document their folktales and folklore? They wrote it down and they made sure it was passed down, and they really value it today. Because for example, Nigerian folklore, we used to have lots of I would say programs, let's say, that were made to spread our folktales and folklore, like Tales by Moonlight and stuff like that. That at least I remember vaguely that being a thing when I was a kid, but it doesn't even exist anymore. And where are those tapes? What's happening? We've lost all that, and it's really tragic.
First of all, I'm going to dispute the word insist on. You said they insist on.
Yeah, that's why I said I'm not sure about insist.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think it was their fault. Of course, that's why they were called pre-literate societies. There was no written form. They didn't know that something that was writing existed. And so that's why they had to tell their stories. And since 1930 or the 1970s and all of that, I think we've been documenting our folktales and oral narratives. And so maybe Haleemah probably has varying opinions, but I think that since that period, there have been a lot of research by people like Ruth Finnegan, William Bascom, Jack Berry, and many anthropologists, colonial psychologists, and Oxford professors have looked into African narratives and literature, and now they're documenting it. And so I don't agree to the fact that you said, although when we talk about our oral literature losing its uniqueness or its authenticity or thereabouts, I also dispute that. And that's because one of the qualities of oral literature is the spontaneity, no authorship, and uniqueness in presentation. Like, for example, when you go to the Yoruba land, they could tell a story now in Ekiti State differently from the way they would tell it in Ondo State. And that doesn't make it less authentic. It just goes to show the character of oral literature, which means that there's no author for these things and that anyone has their uniqueness. They could deploy their uniqueness on every story they tell. So I think that is what is special about oral literature. It's not fixed. It's fluid. It's a fluid text.
Oh, yeah. And then in addition to that, I'm just going to use the post-colonial theorist argument here. Sorry, I'm going a bit academic, you guys. So you guys know how there's the self and the other. So I think Africa has, and Africans really, we've always been considered the other, who is primitive, who is uneducated, who is illiterate and stuff. So I think the fact that we don't document or we're not super proud of our folktales, like Sesi said, and when we were younger, there were like TV shows and stuff that used to tell African stories. But these days, it's like, that's not cool anymore. Like, we just want the progressive things, and progressive items in this content are like Western stories, Western television shows, or stories about Greek gods and stuff. But African myths and everything, they're considered primitive or stuff that kids shouldn't be learning. And I think that's very sad.
Yeah, I think what's really sad about it, the most sad, is really our perspective on it. Because, like, I'm sure that Greek people, like most Greek people are Christians, I believe. They're like Orthodox Christians. They don't worship their own gods, but they don't go about saying like, Zeus is demonic. So I don't know why people can't just maintain that kind of distinction in their head that, it's our culture, it's our heritage, and we should still remember it, hold on to it, and share it with the world. But it doesn't mean that you are completely discounting whatever religion or whatever that you decided to take on. But it doesn't mean you have to throw away your culture either. This is yours. Like, it's the thing that you have, that your ancestors left you, basically, are these stories and this heritage. And if Greek gods can be so popular, why can't ours as well? Like, we have so many cool and interesting things that could probably do, like, they could be great TV adaptations. There could be great, like, series about it, books, etc. And a lot of it, people just don't want to be associated with at all, because they just have it in the back of their minds and like, oh my God, no, babalawo.
Okay, I agree with you. I so much agree with you. And I think it's a national thing. It's something that the government should focus on. They should start to incorporate the literature of Africans and the folklore of Africans into the curriculum from primary schools and secondary schools. It's only when you get to the university you start to learn about oral literature, and at that point it's almost too late for you. You can't always go back to your village and visit their festivals and ask your grandparents for stories. So it's a really national thing that the government should face and make strategic policies and planning to make sure that people are quickly introduced to these things, and so to quickly change people's opinions. Even in primary schools, they still teach foreign stories, foreign folktales and fables. Why can't they teach African ones? So I think there's a responsibility of the government, and I don't think that they're doing well enough.
No, you're definitely right. We have facilities for preservation. Don't we have a Ministry of Heritage, Cultural, Tourism, Kiniko? What are they doing?
And because I'm one of those political scientists that argue for individual agency, I'm going to say each African too has a responsibility. We have to we have to learn to start changing our perspectives on these things. And like Gayatri Spivak said, let the subaltern speak. you guys know this.
Yeah, thank you.
Into police,
Thank you for that.
into like international development stuff. So,
Yes,
well, I think
thank
that's
you
it
for
for
that.
this episode, right?
Yeah, I think we've really covered a lot. I hope that the listeners found it all interesting, and we've kind of, evoked nostalgia in you when we're talking about these topics. And please, because we're all from Nigeria, and we would really like to hear other people's perspectives on this from other African cultures. So we would love it if you would come on our website, Oriire.com, and have a discussion with us about your folktales and your folklore, so that we can learn from it and kind of share knowledge, especially when we're just talking about, are there any similarities between, let's say, Nigerian or Yoruba in particular, or Igbo, and that of other tribes and cultures in other countries. I would really like to learn more about it.
Yeah, and if you also like to speak about it on the podcast, just send an email to...
The email address is info@oriire.com. That's ORIIRE.
So thank you so much for listening, guys. Don't forget to follow us on all our social media platforms. Our handles are Oriire_Africa. So Oriire is spelled ORIIRE_Africa.
And our website is oriire.com. And make sure to subscribe to the podcast so that you don't miss our next episode. We release episodes every 2 weeks, and we're always talking about myth, history, and food. So we'll definitely have something interesting in store for you at the next episode. Thank you for listening.
And thank you so much, Imisi, for sharing knowledge with us.
Bye, you, everyone. Imisi.
Yes, you're welcome.
Haleemah, you don't have African
bye.
I'm even trying to remember. I was trying to remember the poster. What's it called? I can't remember.
I'm going to quickly say Odabo.
No, I don't want to say Odabo. Let me quickly find something.
I've said Odabo.
Like, I was trying
you always
to
go to to find something.
The poster word for buy. I remember the hello one, but okay. Okay, so I'm just going to say, Dalu, you guys. Dalu is thank you in Igbo. Sesi, just cut this part out. I'm not doing my language this week. I was trying to remember what it was.